Okay, let's talk about the 2021 draft for a bit. This is not a redraft. This is more of a how guys are doing right now sort of thing. I'm pretty much just going to go in order of the draft, although I will pair up teammates together when I think it makes sense. But still, it's going to take me a minute to get to like Franz and Giddy, but trust me, nice things will be said about them. And we can start from the top. Let's go with Cade. He's out for the season, of course. Remember in his first season, he had an ankle injury in training camp that led to him missing most of training camp. He missed all of the preseason, and he also missed like the first 4 or 5 games of the regular season in his rookie year. And then he came back. He had to work through missing all that time and all that. And then he becomes the heart of the Pistons offense that needed more talent. And with that said, towards the tail end of the season, you saw the signs of what Cade could really become, right? With his, yeah, he's not a speed demon with the ball, but he can come around a screen. He can put a defender in jail. He can kind of snake his way into the middle of the defense, with which he can then get to a pull-up jumper, which has been probably his most promising thing in the league so far. I remember walking away from his rookie season saying, okay, he's getting better at using his size to be effective as a scorer in the paint. Then the second season comes around. They get Boyan, who's a great shooter. They draft Ivy, who is already one of the fastest dudes with the ball in the league. They also draft Jalen Duren, who's looked good as an inside scorer, as a role guy, all that. And then Cade goes down after 12 games. It's rough, man. But for what it's worth, before he went down, if you want to do a little homework, you can dig into his 4-game stretch he had. 2 games against the Hawks, 1 against the Warriors, 1 against the Bucks. He had over 20 points in all of those games. He had some turnovers as well, don't get me wrong. But he was making just a whole bunch of pull-up jumpers off of screens, and he was having these plays where he was like powering through a Kongwu at the basket to finish a tough layup. And it was like, oh, okay, this is what Cade can be. It's definitely in there. Now within this, look, yeah, the 3-point percentage is what it is so far throughout his career. And, the at-rim percentages are also not exactly where you would want them to be. And I guess what I ask there out of Cade is like, how much more weight could he put on his frame that would benefit him and not slow him down? Because, of course, he's not the fastest guy in the league with the ball, but you also don't want to slow yourself down either. I don't know. I feel like Cade was in store for a really, really good second season, and then he went down, so there you go. And, of course, Cade's a good passer. Now we're going to go to Jalen Green, although I kind of want to pair this up with Şengün as well, and I did talk about these guys recently in my Rockets video, but, Jalen Green has had a 5-game stretch here. Granted, one of the games, he had like a calf thing, and then he missed the next game, so maybe I won't count his one against the Cavs, but he's had 2 40-point games, and then he had a 10-pointer and a 19-1 on a million shots. That's kind of the Jalen Green experience. It's a lot of pull-ups, it's a lot of step-backs. Luckily, Şengün has been getting more minutes and just more attempts and more everything recently, and so he and Jalen Green have had more moments together with handoff actions. Şengün is screening for him a lot. There's also been a few times where Şengün's the top of the key and then Jalen Green gets his cutting on from that. It's not the main thing he's doing, but there's little moments of it here and there. So that's nice. The free throw attempts are up, which I don't think is surprising given how good of an athlete he is, and I said it in that Rockets video I did recently. I do think he got a pretty unfair treatment from the refs last season. But still, the dude loves taking tough shots, so not every game he's going to drop 40. There's going to be some other rough efficiency nights throughout this season for him. As for Şengün, you know what? I've already said enough nice things about Şengün and his skills in the post and with his handle and everything. So I'm just going to point out a couple of plays recently. One against the Wizards where he had the ball, he back to his basket on the baseline, and he throws a perfect around-the-back pass to KJ Martin for an open layup. In that same Wizards game, he had a spin move when they sagged off of him from the three-point line that he got a bucket on. Against the Wolves, the Gobert was sagging off of him. He jab-stepped him a couple times and then took him off the dribble, did a spin move, and then he did that push shot floater thing that he does, and it just froze Rudy. Şengün he's just so good, dude. And he's putting up some defensive numbers recently, too, with steals and blocks. Anyway, now let's get to Evan Mobley at number 3. Mobley is still awesome, dude. Defensively, of course, we all lost our minds at how good he was from day one, whether it be as a help defender, who's someone who can kind of slide down to the paint and still close out. Sometimes he gets burned by that sort of thing, but a lot of the time he's able to kind of cover 2 places at once more than your average guy can. Being super composed, whether it's in drop or playing higher up on screens. And as we know, him and Jared Allen on the court together has just been devastating defensively for him. As for his offense, as he dropped 39 points versus the Bucks not long ago. So the biggest critics of Mobley would say that Mobley's offense is just him finishing around the basket, which I do not agree with. But even when it is those games where maybe he goes I don't know, 6 for 9 from the field and it's just dunks that he got from Garland or Mitchell, whatever, even then it'll be like he'll catch it on the roll, do a pump fake, have one dribble to sort of get around a dude, and then quickly go up and dunk it. Or he'll have like just some really cool layup that kind of gets around a contest or whatever. Like it was never just a simple, wide open thing to the rim for him, even in those circumstances. But also, bro, Mobley is constantly showing signs of doing more than just being a finisher around the basket. I mean, the guy's got a hook shot. He's got a turnaround. He has some size up dribbles that will lead into him taking a mid-range from like around the elbow or at the free throw line or whatever. Like, no, he's not breaking down dudes at the top of the key or whatever, but he certainly has more on offense than just finishing dunks at the rim. Now, with all this said, like, okay, we'll see where the three-pointer gets to. We'll see if he can put on more weight for the sake of, physicality and drawing more free throw attempts. Like, okay, there's certainly things to see, but yeah, the guy's really good. Now let's get to Scotty Barnes. So in his last 15 games, Scotty is averaging 18, 7, and 6 on 59 true shooting with 1.5 turnovers. And I will talk about that passing in a little bit. For the scoring, I mean, the biggest thing with Scotty really is just constant rim pressure through post-ups, and they have been dabbling in starting him in the post in some half-court possessions. Cutting, of course, attacking the offensive glass, which those were things he was already doing in his rookie season, but also being used as a screen setter, being involved in handoff actions if guys want to sag off of him. He's a good inside scorer, and I feel like there's more potential for him to get trips to the line. I mean, he does have some games where he will get to the double digits in free throw attempts, but he'll also have the games where it doesn't happen as much for him, and my gut feeling is that Scotty will be taking more free throws as his career goes on, and he's good from there too. He's been in the mid-70s. But of course, yeah, it would also be nice if he was a better shooter. And, looking at some of his passes recently, I think the most recent one against the Kings was really interesting, where he had 10 assists and 1 turnover. And within that game, you could just see a little bit of everything, where like a corner action where he gets a handoff from Gary Trent Jr., gets ahead of steam, and then he hits Chris Boucher underneath the basket for an assist. There was one where he relocated from the top of the key down to the free throw line, and then he gets it from Van Vliet, and it's a bullet pass to Anunoby in the right corner. Another one where he just had a simple kick out to Van Vliet as Scotty had it in the post. Looking at it, for this season, Scotty, he's third in touches per game behind Siakam and Fred. And I would be interested to see, one, what the Raptors team looks like in like 3 years, but also where Scotty's touches per game and all that are at, and does he have like primary ball handler in him one day? Some of that's going to be dependent on where the pull-up shooting gets to, but the passing is good, no doubt. Now let's get to Jalen Suggs. So, in the beginning of this season, Suggs had some moments as a scorer. Like he had a few 20-point games in there. He had a few games where the three-point percentage was better. It's like, okay, this is starting to ramp up on offense for him. Then he goes down with an injury, and since then his minutes have been lower. His shot attempts have been lower. His ball handling duties have been lower. The defense has still been good, and I still think Suggs can have a place on a team, no doubt. It's just there's a lot of dudes now in Orlando who are looking to get some shots. And one of those guys is Franz Wagner. He's averaging 20 points on 60 true shooting. And the interesting thing with Franz to me is the variety in which he's scoring, where sometimes, yeah, it might just be a simple pick and roll up top, and he is able to freeze defenders for a second and then hit them with either a crossover, between the leg dribble, or sometimes just going in a straight line, and then he's able to use, enough of his size to finish at the rim. But also, I feel like he's really good at just flowing within the offense, as basic as it sounds, where let's say Cole Anthony's got the ball, and then Franz will just relocate from maybe the corner to the top of the key and get himself an open look off of that. There was one I saw recently where he was bringing it up court in transition. He kicks it to Jonathan Isaac on the left-hand side, and then it's just kind of a jumbled mess in the paint, and then Franz quickly flashes out to the top of the key, and he gets a three-pointer off of it. Simple things that don't look very complicated when they happen, but you realize like not every player is thinking about it like that. I'm also a fan of his layups that more so look like hook shots when he's trying to score over dudes in the paint. I guess if I was going to have any questions about Franz for the rest of his career, it would be like, let's see where his three-point attempts end up, because right now he's averaging 4.5, and there will be the games where he takes like 7 or 8 attempts, and other games he'll take like 2 or 3. As far as his passing, I think Franz is a good passer. The reason the assist numbers are not super high is just because he's not the one doing everything for the Magic as a ball handler. Like Markelle Fultz is technically leading them in touches per game recently. Granted, the difference between him at number 1 and Cole Anthony at number 4 is only about 13 touches a game. But yeah. Now let's get to Josh Giddy. So I think the most noticeable thing with Giddy, and their coach Mark Daignault said this too, was that he was being more physical on drives. And I mentioned this in that Thunder are ahead of schedule video. Daignault's also helping him out by just having good spacing a lot of the time with OKC. But also, Giddy's aggressiveness has just been there a little bit more. I mean, his rookie season, he attempted 3.5 shots a game in the restricted area. This season, that's up to 5.5. Granted, some of that's also going to be because he attacks the offensive glass and he has been getting his cutting on a bit, and some of that's going to be transitioned as well, but still, I think that's been noticeable in the half court. Now, sure, there are still going to be some plays where maybe he will not be just fast enough to get by his guy, and he's got to go to a sort of layup or hook shot sort of thing that's like a foot farther away from the rim than you'd really like it to be. But it feels like that's happening less often, so that's good. Yeah, the three ball will continue to be a process, and we all know that passing-wise, there's very few dudes who are a better passer than Josh Giddey. Like, yeah, he's going to have the games where he might get like 4 assists or whatever, but that's fine. Partially because assists are not the only gauge in how good of a passer a guy is, but also, I think the best version of Giddy will be him looking to be more aggressive as an inside scorer while still averaging like 6 to 7 assists, as opposed to just being super pass first and always thinking about the assist as opposed to trying to be that aggressive inside scorer. Now let's talk about Jonathan Kamenga, who I think has been figuring out more things within the Warriors offense. I think the most noticeable thing is that he is realizing that there are these windows in which if he cuts to the basket, he's pretty much guaranteed a bucket. So maybe it's like there was one play recently where Draymond and Clay were involved in a screen, and then Kamenga just cut at the perfect opportunity to where he got it from Draymond on the short roll. There was another where Jordan Poole was moving off ball, Kamenga screens for him, and in the exact second that Kamenga screens, he then just cuts, and then he gets an easy one from DiVincenzo at the top of the key. He's had a couple of catch and drives that have been pretty nice. He has also been in the dunker spot, like not all the time, but there's been some moments there that have resulted in some buckets for him. And I think you have to be really intrigued with his defense as well. I mean, the loudest moments were when his on-ball defense was really solid against Tatum in that one game, and then another one where Luka had a great game overall against the Warriors, but Kamenga guarded him better than the average guy would. But even just on a possession-to-possession basis, where within the Warriors defense, or maybe you got to switch, or you have to zone up between like two guys on the opposite side of where the ball is or whatever, it just seems like Kaminga's fitting into that whole thing better recently. And I think he's got room to keep on growing a lot as a defensive player, and I mean really just as a player overall. I think the Warriors should be very excited with Kamenga. Now, before I start going rapid fire on some of the not as big names, I will mention Ayo and Herb Jones because they were two of the more like beloved rookies last year, even if they weren't putting up a bunch of points. And I mean, offensively, both have not been as good this season. Ayo's shooting has been a little worse. Similar thing with Herb. I feel like being a point guard on the Bulls is just kind of awkward because LaVine and DeRozan do so much, which is why Lonzo, when he's healthy, is such a perfect fit for them because of how good of a shooter he is, and he's just naturally just really grown into being a good catch-and-shoot guy. And it's not that Ayo couldn't do that last season. It was more like that's not the ideal thing for Ayo. And so I guess it just kind of caught up with him this year. But I think both of these guys are still going to have long careers as heavy minutes rotation guys. And I would like to believe that Herb Jones will appear on a few all-defense teams within the next, 7 to 10 years, although it is going to be a steep competition. Also, I don't know if you're supposed to do the undrafted guys when you do a video like this, but if so, shout out to Jose Alvarado and Austin Reeves. I think Davion's defense is better than his offense. Like, you can certainly find moments of him just being like a bulldog defensively on the ball. He's, of course, still not the tallest dude in the world, and also, given that nearly half of his shot attempts are threes, you wish he was a little better from there. But we'll see with Davion. For Zaire Williams, the hope for Zaire is that he can make threes, especially from the corners, and just attack off the dribble enough if he's got daylight off of a catch pretty much. He has lob potential and stuff, but they haven't been able to tap into him as like a screen setter the way they have like Brandon Clark, for example. He's been better defensively throughout his career so far than on offense. We'll just kind of see, as basic as that sounds. James Bouknight, he's got 57 career games, and he hasn't consistently played since November. The hope with him was that he could create his own shot. Josh Primo, we know what happened there. Chris Duarte, he missed a decent amount of time this season, and the scouting around him was pretty consistent, and his jump shot's going to be really good. In the first season, okay, the signs were there. Second season, not as much. I'm not that concerned, but with Mathurin now and Halliburton, like, it wouldn't shock me if Duarte was on a different team in like 2 years. but I could also see him being off the bench for these guys and just being fine. Moses Moody, look, it's tough to get minutes on the Warriors as a young player, man. Okay. Corey Kispert, dude can shoot and he plays for the Wizards. Trey Murphy III, dude can shoot, he plays for the Pelicans, and also he finds himself in transition getting some easy looks more than your average guy. I don't want to name every single guy in the draft, with apologies to like Trey Mann and Kai Jones and Jalen Johnson. I do want to go down to Quentin Grimes. I think Quentin shows all the signs of being the 3-and-D with hopefully more than just 3 on offense guy for the Knicks. The thing is that because it's a Tibbs team, he's playing like 36 minutes a game. And I mean, hell, their last game against the Nets, he was guarding Kyrie most of the time. They're just throwing him to the fire pretty much. Bones Highland, I think he can drop 25 in a random playoff game, but now he's in trade rumors, so that's kind of interesting. He could also go like 2 for 11 in a playoff game, don't get me wrong. I think Cam Thomas believes that he can score 30 a game in the NBA right now. Santi Aldama is really tall, he can shoot, and he can put the ball on the floor a little bit. Also, shout out to Aaron Wiggins, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, and Jericho Sims.